Here we go, y'all. Okay, today's topic, second week of Sefirat HaOmer. Also the yard site, the anniversary of the passing of Yoshua ben Nun. And that's actually about Gevura today. We're talking about the week of Gevura. So we want to understand what Gevura is all about. Little rewind. The whole concept of Sefirat HaOmer, of course, like we said last week, is essentially a journey. It's a journey of humanhood. And what humanhood means, first and foremost, is asserting the human spirit, right? Meaning to say, like an animal, a lot of the times will has a certain inclination, a certain instinct, and just follows up on that, right? The idea of humanhood means that you might have that, you have that same animal side as well, but you're able to have a certain level of freedom from that. And so you could have all sorts of instincts, inclinations, emotional responses, but yet we're able to kind of free ourselves from that in order to go ahead and make the choice we want to make. And this is the journey of Sefirat HaOmer, is to go from a state of animal living to a state of human living. Ultimately, we're going to get the Torah, God willing, and that's going to tell us, okay, now do this, now call on this midah, call on this attribute, call on this emotion. But if you first haven't gotten an ownership of your emotions, an ownership of your midot, an ownership of your characteristics, so then the Torah is not going to do you much good, right? Because if you don't have a mastery of yourself, you can't call upon the different parts of yourself in order to go ahead and act or to hold back or whatever it might be in that particular moment. And so this is really the journey of what that's all about. And that definitely speaks to our topic here today. Our topic here today is the topic of Gevura. Gevura, oftentimes in English, they translate this as strength or power, but we want to get a little deeper into it, and we let the rabbis define these terms for us. And so if you take a look in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, it says, Ezehu Gibor, who is the Gibor? What is the concept of Gevura? Hakovesh et Yitzro, the one who conquers their inclination. The one, meaning to say, by the way, it doesn't even say the one who conquers their evil inclination. That's not what's said. The one who conquers their inclination. What does that mean to say? Very, very similar to what we were just speaking about. It's the idea of having a personal ownership, having a personal mastery, but it means to say that whatever our situation is, whatever our relationship is, can I go ahead and put a stop there if I need to, if the relationship calls for it, whether it be in terms of myself, whether it be in terms of my relationship with others, whether it be in terms of my relationship with God, right? We can have certain feelings or passions or desires or whatever, and we can even think and feel like it's coming from a good place, it's coming from a positive place. But hold on a second. If there's another person in that relationship, then I kind of have to check in with them, right? And even if I made certain assumptions, and you know what happens when you assume, but even if I've made certain assumptions and then maybe I'm told otherwise, so then if I'm having a relationship with that person, if I'm having a relationship with Hashem, or if another person is having a relationship with me, right, I need to be able to call upon that side of myself to be able to say, hold on a second, there's somebody else here, right? And that gets us to the concept of boundaries and to the concept of respect. And that's really what Gevura ultimately takes us to. It's an aspect of respect. So last week we were talking about the concept of chesed. We're talking about chas dalid, the one who's compassionate on the one who does not have. And that means the extending of yourself to that other, right? And we spoke about that last week. And if you need and you want, you can get the recording for that. But this is the other side of that. This is like, hold on a second. If you're always all about just giving and extension of self, expansion of self, which is, it first seems nice, but then hold on a second, there's another attribute, which is like, wait, what about that other person? What if they don't want to receive? Or what about, God, what about ourselves? What if people are giving to us? And hold on a second, how do we express the idea that like, thank you, but no thank you, right? And that's really going to be our topic today, right? And so Gevura really means acknowledging where you end and the other begins, or acknowledging where the other ends and you begin, right? And so we're going to talk about this in the three categories I just mentioned. We're going to talk about this in terms of respecting Hashem, in terms of respecting others, and in terms of respecting yourself. And as always, my friends, feel free to chime in at any time. drop a comment in the chat in the chat box, and hopefully we'll get to any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas you all might have, right? And so let's start on top, since especially also when we're talking about Sefirat HaOmer, first and foremost, this is where we're finding ourselves ultimately for the purpose of stepping into that relationship with Hashem. So let's start what we mean by respecting Hashem, and let's talk about this, right? So you have these two categories, like we mentioned before, Chesed and Gevura, or perhaps we can say love and respect. And a lot of times for people, these can seem contradictory. They seem like a contradiction. Like, how do we have both for Hashem? How do we have both love and respect for Hashem? And think about any relationship. Like, how do we manage? How do we juggle both? One of them seems to be me coming forward, right? Love and all of that. Another one, respect, or sometimes what we refer to as yira in Judaism, awe. It seems to be like, whoa, holding back, right? And so I didn't really quite understand how to explain this so well until one day I came across something. I don't know how I got to this in YouTube. Don't ask. You never know where YouTube might take you. And sure enough, one time there was this thing title there: Justin Bieber surprises his fans. And I was like, all right, that looks interesting. Let's see what happens with his fans. So I click on that, and certainly it was the old. He was probably 13 years old or something at the time. And then there's like a couple little teeny bopper girls hanging around or whatever. And then he kind of comes up behind them and he's like, hey guys, and they all turn around and they don't know what to do with themselves. On the other hand, they want to kind of like jump on him. They also kind of like they don't want to feel like an idiot, and they don't understand, and then maybe he's not okay with that. They don't know what to do with themselves. They want to go forward, but also they don't want to do something to damage and bring down the relationship. So it's kind of this like middle space, and I was like, we learned something from the idols, right? We learned something. Thank you. We learned something from the idols, right? There's a reason we call them idols, right? Because and how in Judaism they say don't worship, right, foreign gods, don't worship idols, right? This is exactly a perfect example. This is, if you will, Kabbalistically, klipa, for those who are understood. Like, there's like a lower level manifestation kind of from the other side of what it means to have a love and respect, truly, right? And so this is the idea. And you find, so in Judaism, it comes down to when we have that relationship with Hashem, a lot of us are more, a lot of times, connected to that love side, to that passion side, to that growth side. I shouldn't say growth goes either way, but to this love and passionate side, right? And giving and doing and feeling and experiencing. But there are those of us also where there's also this other side, right? Which is, hold on a second, there's a God. What does God want, right? What are we supposed to do in a particular situation? And so it comes down to, on the one hand, passion, which perhaps you could say is the love side. And the other side is halacha, bottom line Jewish law. And that's really what we need, first and foremost. A lot of times people like to push this and push that in their Jewish agenda. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But bottom line, in learning and this and that, we need all that. That's true. But the bottom line, what we need in life, ongoing, is passion and the how-to. Passion and the how-to. The bigger why, the bigger yearning, the bigger fire, the meaningfulness of it all, and then also the bottom line is, what am I supposed to do? Because if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing here, if I'm not involved with growing Jewishly, just in terms of Jewish practice, then the how-tos and the A, Bs, and the Cs. So then, like, in the end of the day, what the heck am I doing over here? And you can make the case the other way to a certain extent. You can make not to the same extent, but to a certain extent, you can make the case the other way too, right? If I show up as a hollow body without any soul, without any passion behind it. So also, to a certain extent, what am I really doing here? And so we need to combine the two. And so for some of us, we're rooted in that passion and growing and love, and we're on fire about stuff. And then there's other people who are on fire about the how-tos, but not necessarily having much passion about it. They're very specific about the how-tos, but not much, but kind of get lost in, like, hold on a second, okay, I did X, Y, and Z, but like, did you think for a second that there's a God who's behind all of that and who you're trying to connect with when you do those things, right? So all of us are rooted in one of those and need to extend of ourselves to connect to that other side. But the truth is, this is what we're trying to do as Jews, right? Is to find that balance and strike that balance. And so it's not to say that one side is better than the other, because I don't know that that's true. And even so, it doesn't even matter, because wherever we are, we are. Wherever we start from, we start from. Wherever we're more connected to, we feel more connected to. And we work from there. So it doesn't even matter if one is quote unquote better than the other. Bottom line is that if we all want to be complete Jews, and that means growing in terms of the chesed side of things and growing in terms of the gevura side of things, growing in terms of the love side of things, growing in terms of the respect side of things. And we see a great example of it actually in this Torah portion, that you have Aaron's sons bring a foreign, what's called a ezara, a foreign fire to God. And it turned out, did not turn out too good for them, right? They ended up dying, whatever. Well, why? I mean, they were rooted, they were passionate, they wanted to do something good. Answer is, when you're in a relationship, there is the other, to take that you need to take note of that side of what the relationship calls for, right? If you're in a relationship with a friend, if you're in a relationship with a spouse, and you just want to give and give and give to them, but you don't take into account, like, hold on a second, what do they actually want? Do they want this thing? Do they not want this thing? Then you're not giving space for that other person. Your giving isn't really giving. I mean, externally you mean it to be giving, but like, hold on a second, are you really giving to that person? Or is it more about, like we said last week, you have a side of yourself that feels like it needs to give, and you're not taking into account, though, that you're not giving that respect and that space to that other person, right? So you can be totally on fire, but then that fire is going to consume you, because you're not giving a space for that other person, and then refining how you're giving and turning that fire, so to speak, into a laser, right? Making it something that's constructive, something that fits into that klis, fits into that vessel, fits into the one who you are giving to, right? And that's essentially what happened to the sons of Aaron. And so how often are we bringing foreign fires in our relationships? How often are we trying to give in a way that the other person doesn't want to receive? And we're like, and we try to put what we think they should want onto them, or what we feel like we need to give onto them. And then we get frustrated when they're not happy with it, right? And so this takes a little bit of gevura, self-discipline on ourselves, right? In terms of, okay, how am I giving, right? And to be able to make that space for that other, right? And so that's about having respect and gevura in terms of our relationship with Hashem. What about having that respect in terms of others, right? So first and foremost, what that means is to check in with other people, to ask them, is this what they want? Is this not what they want? Right? People relate in different ways. Famously, there's a book, one of the famous marriage books out there, The 5 Love Languages, right? That there's different people who experience and connect to that. For them, relationship or connection is, one of those things, right? Whether it's quality time, physical touch, I forget the other ones, but there's the point is that people experience things differently, and so therefore, to check in with other people. And that means then also when that means, by the way, what does that mean? That means that you're respecting them, right? You're empathizing, there we go, thank you very much. They're empathizing with them by acknowledging that their perception is very often, perhaps even most likely, different than your perception. Do they really want what you're giving, right? So a lot of times people, for whatever reason, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, they'll make as if they want it, or they'll, pretend to be happy with it. They'll say thank you. Especially Americans are very bad with this, unfortunately. Like there's like a little bit no spine, little bit of a gevura problem going on with the Americans. That they'll be like all polite because, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, mostly because they fear rejection and stuff like this. But like, so hold on a second. If you really respect them, and if you really want a relationship of respect in which you respect them and they respect you, so show them respect by actually delving into, is this something that they really want, or is this something that they're kind of trying to, be a little bit polite about? You understand what I'm saying? So be real about that and be respectful about that, right? Because and that also, when you're talking about respecting people, that also means respecting not only their wishes, but also what they're connected to, their stuff, right? You'll find that if someone doesn't respect your stuff, take note that they're not respecting you either, right? They're not respecting you either. And so same thing with other people. When we deal with other people, to respect their possessions, to respect what is theirs, that is an extension of them, and that is a manner in which we respect them, right? Okay, so that's respecting others and allowing for those kind of boundaries as well. Now, also, what about respecting yourself? So same thing, check in with yourself, right? If someone's doing something and you're kind of like, you're uneasy about it, whatever, like take a minute, pause, check in with yourself. Is this something that I really want? Now, if your head starts saying, well, hold on a second, I want to say yes, because if I kind of try to not accept it, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And then, hold on a second. So you're already down a rabbit hole. Take a minute, check in with yourself. If the thing is something you don't want, you say that you don't want it, right? So like this is something that's so important to do in the office, in the relationships, with friends, with roommates, with spouses as well, with anybody, right? And one way to think about it, and one way to share it with somebody else, is I feel blank when blank happens. What I need is blank. Does that make sense? Right? To just keep it simple. And we're going to do more about boundaries in a second, but I like to recognize, hold on, when a certain person does something, right? And when a certain person does something, let's first, within yourself, this isn't the way to speak right now this second, right? Just within yourself. When someone does X, I feel Y. So what's that Y? Upset, violated, made as if I'm nothing, made to be felt like I'm nothing. You know, well, what is that feeling that's coming up for you? I feel blind, whatever it might be, right? To take note of it for yourself and say, okay, if there was no consequences, what would I need? What would I like to happen in this moment or in the future in these circumstances, right? Okay, so you do that for yourself. But then when you share it with the person, you can share it as simple as that. We're going to go into more intricate ways of doing this, but just keeping it simple for a second. I feel blank when blank happens. What I need is blank, right? And by the way, let's be very clear that notice how I used all I's. I didn't say use. When you communicate with other people, no use, because then people feel attacked, then people get defensive, and then they're not going to hear what you have to say. And so it also has to be like, look, this is how I feel. You know, this way also you're not making a statement of like what's correct or what's right or who's right and who's wrong. You're just saying, look, this is how I feel. Yeah, you know, you could say you're right and this and that. This is what I feel. No one can touch that, right? And so you have to take a step back. Okay, what are your standards, right? There is something in Judaism called everyone has a certain, what they call a Daled Amos. A Daled Amot, like it means like 4 cubits all around you is like your personal quote unquote space. Right? What's 4 cubits? It's, I don't know, 8 feet or so, 8 feet around you. So what that means is, the only reason I'm sharing that with you is like, look, you have this idea in Judaism of personal space, of personal boundaries, of like a space that is yours, right? So the key is to don't lose yourself in others' expectations, right? And so that means then also, you know, that means also like not to, that like you could be, you know, you could be supportive of others, for example, without also taking responsibility for their choices and for their feelings and stuff like this also, right? There's the ability to go ahead and to clarify, again, where you end and the other person begins, also where the other person begins and where the other person ends and where you begin, right? And so respect and having self-respect and personal dignity means establishing boundaries, right? And I want to talk about with you guys now a couple of ways, a couple of methods for establishing boundaries in a healthy way. And then we'll also talk about a couple of ways that this can go haywire, okay? So two methods for establishing healthy boundaries goes like this. There's the short path and there is the long path. Let's start with the short path. And you have to figure out when to use which one. Okay? So the short path means like this. Very simply, like I said before, like the example I gave before, I feel blank when blank happens. What I need is blank. Let's notice a few things about that line. One is that it's very direct. Okay? Another thing is that it's concise. Another thing is that it is unapologetic. And also, the fourth thing is that it is respectful. It is respectful. Remember, it's not like, okay, something happens, you don't like, something happens, you don't like, something happens, you don't like. You're really stirring, you're upset. And then you blow up and you say, well, I feel this when this happens and what I need is. First, I don't know if you're going to do that when you're all like, getting ready to explode. If you're going to stay on the eyes. But either way, the point is that this is supposed to be shared from a space of like, assuming that, let's say the other person didn't know, even if you think it's crazy they didn't know. Assuming, even if they were pressuring you or whatever, to be holding in a place of comfortable with yourself, and then to share. If you're feeling like, I gotta share this thing right now, usually if you're ever feeling like, I gotta say this thing right now, that's usually the worst time to say that thing, right? So that's always not the time that needs to be said. Or a lot of times parents have that with their kids, by the way, also, that's a big one. A lot of times parents have that with their kids, like, that thing that they did, he has to have a reaction, something has to happen, so it doesn't turn into a snowball into something else, and need to say. That's the time you don't want to say anything, right? So, so that's the short path, okay? The short path to setting healthy boundaries. The longer path to setting healthy boundaries goes a little bit something like this. Basically, it can be done in 4 steps, right? You say to the person, can we find a good time to talk? Can we find a good time to talk? And this, what I'm going to give you right now, came from someone who's a big expert in this stuff. So first, you sit down again, coming from a calm place, and you give them the opportunity. Okay, can we find a good time to talk? Right. Then the next thing you do is you validate their claims. Right. What does this do? They're going to make certain claims about whatever it is. Whatever the thing is that you're giving. That you're want to change. They're going to give reasons. You can probably assume a lot of the time that they're going to give reasons for why they did whatever it is they did. What you want to do there is really hear it, and if you know what's coming, preempt it. And tell them, yeah, I know that X, Y, and Z is the situation, and this is why this keeps happening, right? And so you want to, what this does is, again, makes them feel understood, and it makes them feel not attacked, okay? And when you do that, you hopefully, stop any objections that they would otherwise have before, it doesn't come up for them, because you've validated them and you felt like, okay, look, like you're totally understanding where they're coming from, totally like, you get why they did what they did, no problem. But then what you do, and this is perhaps the main aspect of it, is you share your pain. You share how this has invaded your space, right? You share how you felt in this situation. And again, make it about how you feel, not what they did, Again, that's a big one. And then say, when you share how you felt, and again, this isn't about a statement of truth. This isn't about your fault, my fault. This is about, this is what I feel. This is my pain in this situation. This is my struggle, my difficulty. This is what's coming up for me when X, Y, and Z happens. How can we remedy this situation? You see that? So now you brought them into it and you kind of put the ball in their court. And a lot of times they'll come up with something to resolve the situation. And even if they don't, so you work together with them and you say, look, this is what I need. Do you hear that idea? So people who really actually do want to have a relationship with you, people who really care at all, will be receptive to this, right? Because people who actually do care and people who actually do want to build a relationship want to hear where your comfort level is, right? So that is the process, I think, of building healthy boundaries. A couple of options. Before we go on, we're going to talk about how this can go haywire in a couple of different ways. We're going to talk about what stops us from building healthy boundaries. We'll also talk about, we'll talk about where, when we don't build why we might not build healthy boundaries, or why we go to the other side of extreme and do boundaries over the top. But before we get there, questions, thoughts, ideas. Let me see here. Let me get through the chats. Oh, man. Whoa, so you're saying control is the klipa of the midah. Oh, yes, to a certain extent I am, Rebecca. I'm saying if you go over the top with it, we didn't talk about over the top yet. Control is the over the top part, which we're going to get, one of the over the top parts we're going to get to right now. All right. So why is it that so many of us have difficulty establishing healthy boundaries in our relationships? So first and foremost, when we mentioned it, hold on a second. What if establishing boundaries with the other person is not receptive? Okay, Yofi, very good, Rivka. Thank you so much for asking that question. So then that's when you have to take a step back. You put some space there, right? And it's not, you have to be very careful with this. This can be very subtle, actually. This is a tricky one that we have to master. To take a step back, but in a way that's just simply consequential of the fact that they weren't respectful to you, as opposed to doing it what's called in Hebrew dafka, as opposed to doing it as, giving them silent treatment. You don't want to do the whole I'm giving you silent treatment thing. That's already punishment, it's attack, and it shows that you're bothered. That you don't want to be holding from that place. You want to just be consequential. Okay, this person doesn't respect me. Okay, I'll move away. There's a difference between consequential response versus I'm giving you silent treatment, right? One is a consequential response. The other one's like a punishment or something to get a rise out of you, to get a change out of you proactively because it bothered me. Those are two different things. I hope you can feel that a little bit, Rivka. Thank you so much for asking that question. So what stops us from establishing healthy boundaries? So first and foremost, again, I'll give you that American thing. You don't want to appear rude. You don't want to, and then someone look at you in a negative way. Maybe they'll say some negative things to their friends, or someone that they know, they'll say something negative about you. Again, it wraps up with fear of rejection. And here's the crazy thing. So lack of self-respect gets in the way of you respecting yourself, right? That's what ends up happening, right? And what happens, by the way? What's the result of having no boundaries? What's the result of not saying when something bothers you or something is not feeling right for you, right? So the thing continues to happen. And what do you start to feel? You start to feel a certain level of inner discord, right? You start to feel resentment towards the person or the situation or the thing that's going on, right? It leads to all sorts of relationship problems. It leads to a sense of like a loss of self in the whole thing, right? You lose yourself in the relationship. There's no you in the relationship because you're always afraid what the other person's going to think. You're afraid the other person's going to leave you, whatever it is. There's no you to leave because you're not even really there because you're not being you, right? And obviously it leads also to a lot of times a waste of time, a waste of money, right? Can't say no to certain things that people are offering. You're twisting your arm that you feel like you have to do, right? You act against your inner voice. I'll tell you a story about this, right? Tell you a story about this. A number of years ago, a long, long time ago. So I was once going out with this gal, and we were driving out of a parking lot, and we got a truck backed into a pickup truck backed into the car that I was driving, and made a big sound. But when you looked outside, it was like a little dent, and this car was 10 years old, whatever. It wasn't a big deal. And I was going to be like, listen, I didn't want to be that guy. That wasn't the person I wanted to be like, I need to take all this money off a stupid little dent and this and that. I wanted to let them go. The girl I was with got all in a fuss about it and was like, no, they should get the money for it, blah, blah, blah. And in that moment, I didn't want to upset her. And so I went ahead and I did that, right? Which was good for my bank account, but it wasn't good for the bank account of my heart because it did not sit well with me to the point that I'm talking to you about it here 20 years later, right? As a good example of when I didn't say like, hold on a second, this is my domain, right? And that's the point, by the way, with boundaries, right? It's about, this is something that entered my domain. This is my choice. This is what I want to do, right? Boundaries doesn't mean I'm going into your domain. Boundaries means that I'm just establishing that you're entering into my bound domain. I'm like, yo, slow down, sister, right? This is my choice. This is in my domain. This is in my Dalet Amos, right? And so that was a time where I felt a certain loss of self in that situation. I wasn't the person I wanted to be because I was concerned about what this other person is going to think and where that's going to take the situation and where that's going to take the relationship, right? So it's a bad space to be in, right? But that's what happens when you're not holding in a really good holding strongly in terms of boundaries. So boundaries doesn't mean putting the smack down on other people or anything like that. It means just like, no, I'm going to be me. I'm having self-respect. I'm having dignity, right? And if you didn't know that you're encroaching on my space, on my choice, so then okay, I'm gonna be like, yo, this isn't cool. You know what I mean? And so you have to do this. You have to do this. Everyone in your life, parents too. Don't tell my kids though. Okay. So this is important. Okay. Now I hope that makes sense. Now. That's what happens when we don't have boundaries, right? By the way, what happens when I continuously make choices or lack of choices, like I did there in that story of the car of getting hit by the other car, right? What happens when you continue down that path in life, right? You feel a certain sense of hollowness. You feel a certain sense of a shell of yourself. By the way, this is what happens to a lot of guys in marriage. Also, a lot of guys, probably girls too, but definitely it's like a well-known phenomenon with the guys that the girl starts to find a way to basically, I don't know, usually it's with yelling, to be honest, or other manipulative tactics, that just the guy's like, look, I can't even deal with it already. So he just like passes up on doing certain things that are in his space, that are in his choice to do about living his life and the person he wants to be or something that he wants to do or etc. And then because he just doesn't want to deal with the hell he's going to have to pay, so to speak, from her. And unfortunately, this is normal stuff. So, but that if that happens over and over and over again for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, then yeah, guy's going to be a shell of himself, right? That's what happens. That's what happens, unfortunately, right? And I can tell you many, many stories of that, of people I know who just crazy stories that you wouldn't believe about, just like the types of things that people will go to. Come back right away from shul. Don't stay for the extra 20 minutes of kiddush. Actually talk to people, right? No, come back. I need you back at the house to help with whatever with the kids, whatever it might be. And no, it doesn't mean, I'm not saying guys shouldn't help with the kids, whatever. No, but it's okay. The guy has a personal space. You know what I mean? And so he runs back in order to, in order to help out or whatever. But there's an imbalance there. There's an imbalance there, and that's what's going on constantly. Then the person's going to have a loss of self, right? And by the way, the woman's not going to like that either, because she wants a man. She doesn't want this shell of a person, right? And of course, so anyway, don't want to go too much on a tangent about that. That's the no boundary side, right? There's another side, though, of boundaries. The other side of boundaries, going over the top, right? Rigidity, not giving at all, right? Being very rigid, being very controlling, asserting unhealthy control, right? So why does someone become rigid and assert unhealthy control? Primary reason is it's rooted in trauma, right? That traumas and lead to, and what do we mean by trauma? Trauma doesn't mean, a lot of times vernacularly, trauma seems to mean like a person, God forbid, in a bad car accident or something like that, or a person got abused or something. That's not, certainly in psychology, they've taken the word trauma and expanded the definition tremendously to just simply mean something that was basically happened to the person that was outside of their capability of containing it in that moment. And so it was something that just was overwhelming much more than they could contain, and caused them a pain, caused them a pain that is still has not been properly contained. That's a trauma, okay? Don't know if that's dictionary definition, but that's more or less the way it's spoken about. And so what this leads to, though, for people is negative thinking patterns. We're not going to go into all of them now, but that ultimately leads to triggers. And that internalized loss of control. Nice, Kimmy, thank you. Good to see you, by the way, Kimmy. And triggers leads you to rigidity, distance, explosive, irrational reactions on a regular basis. And also, ultimately, that also leads to addiction, because addiction is really only there to pacify the pain and fill the hole of pain. But we're not getting into addiction now. That's not the conversation here. The point is, though, we start to now go ahead, due to what's happened to us, we go ahead and now we try to build walls for our own protection. And of course, those walls become also the walls of our personal prison. And so I think we can go through 3 signs that you are triggered by a past trauma, rather than simply the painful thing that another person has done, right? So a lot of times, listen, someone does something painful to you, okay, so there's a cause, there's an effect for that pain. But there are certain things certain ways we can react that are a good sign that our reaction isn't just based on the thing that the person did, but it's coming from something that's much bigger and much more. That it's rooted in a trauma from our past. Okay? So sign number 1 that you're triggered from a trauma from your past is that you are absolutely sure. You're absolutely sure. Right? So for example, are you absolutely sure that you're absolutely correct about the situation you're upset about? Right? Are you absolutely sure that the way you view the situation is the only correct way to look at it? Are you absolutely sure that the other person is absolutely at fault? Absolutes are a sign that the present disharmony that you have with whoever the person is, spouse, friend, roommate, whatever it is, parent, I guess also, that person is that what the difficulty, the situation, the disharmony you have with that person is awakening like this powerful pain from your past, right? So the pain, though, is usually there, but just kind of like quiet. It's just kind of there. You kind of know it's there. Maybe it's possible you like know it there. It's kind of like in the background all the time. But then, right? That's why you're so sure that your way of seeing it is correct, because your entire viewpoint that you're coming from is rooted in that background, is rooted in that pain, right? So the person, the spouse, the parent, the friend, the roommate, whatever it is, they hit on a sore spot that's part of the entire framework from which you experience everything in your life, right? So when a person triggers that pain, right, it's as if your entire reality is like being provoked, right? And you can't really see anything outside of that. So this is why you feel, this is what a person feels when that's hit. So now when a person has that, again, a person's going to be easily come to a place that they're over the top about and be controlling about certain situations because they're so afraid of getting to that place of pain, right? Another sign that a person is triggered by a past trauma is that you feel an all-encompassing pain, right? So think about it like this. Does a minor infraction by another person, something that's objectively a minor infraction by another person, cause you to feel major pain or a deep sense of betrayal, right? Or does, for example, a small like misstep by someone, by a spouse or whatever, does it make you feel like the entire relationship is way off and we should really just rip down this entire relationship, right? Like if you're feeling that, so, and by the way, you can also throw in sometimes the whole idea of the principle of the matter and all of that sometimes can be thrown into that as well, right? That also could be coming from this place. If the hurt that you are feeling is objectively, and you have to be honest, step outside of yourself, maybe when you calm down, speak to other people or whatever, if the hurt you're feeling is out of proportion with the offense that the other person has committed, so that's a sign that the hurt is rooted in a past trauma and past pain, right? Because the hurt is not merely an effect of what this person just did now to you. There's something bigger, there's something more deep-seated that is coming to the forefront, right? So, and again, this means that people can overcompensate for this situation of pain that is there and go over the top. So a person who has these traumas knows they have these tendencies, know they can easily be injured, know that they're sore, emotionally sore. People in this situation can be over the top about how's this person going to react and what's this person going to do, and so they can get much. And so instead of just being standard, healthy, coming from a healthy place of boundary, they can be over the top rigid, right? One more sign, another sign that a person is triggered from past trauma is that when someone does something, you feel like you're being erased, right? So, for example, do you feel like any little disagreement has to be resolved right away? Right? Do you feel like nothing matters unless the two of you can figure this out right here and now? Yeah? Ever have that experience? I'll give you one. Do you feel like, do you also feel like it's impossible for you to go on performing other responsibilities and just doing other things and focusing in on anything else if this disharmony that exists in this particular relationship isn't resolved, right? If we have those feelings, and that's something that you come in contact with, certainly if it's something you come in contact with on a regular basis. So you should know that this inability to like allow for disagreements, allow for a certain level of disharmony, while continuing to move forward with life, even though this thing isn't resolved just yet, that shows a certain lack of self-worth, a certain lack of self-esteem, It shows an aspect of seeking personal validation through your relationship. And so a person in that situation can feel like, okay, then that without this relationship, without this working well, I feel like I'm nothing. I feel like I'm being blotted out. I feel like I'm being erased. When this relationship isn't operating in line of how the way I think it should be, right? And so when we're coming from that place, again, we can be very, very careful. We can be very concerned about things. And so the boundaries are no longer boundaries. Now it's going beyond. It's It's getting to a place that's unhealthy, right? And so in order to deal with this, that's a whole other separate thing. How do we deal with our triggers? How do we deal with really our traumas, right? Which has to do with healing. So someone here asked me, can you recap the 3 signs in short? So fine. Number 1 was you're absolutely sure, right? That was number 1. You're absolutely sure, absolutely. Number 2 was you feel all-encompassing pain, right? Like way over the top. Person did something minor, and then it's just like you feel like, the whole relationship's going to hell in a handbasket, right? And again, a lot of times that's the principle of the matter, right? And number 3 was you feel as if you are not. You feel like if there's a problem in this relationship, I feel, or if there's some kind of disharmony, some kind of situation, I feel like I'm not worth anything, right? These are all coming from places of trauma, okay? And so when that happens, a lot of times people will be going to overcompensate and out of fear of coming to these places and coming to this pain and coming to these feelings. And so then that could lead us to be setting not real boundaries, more like walls of protection rather than boundaries of health and security and safety and self-worth. But anyway, so this is more or less the concept of Gevura, and then also where we can go off to the extremes of either not having boundaries or going over the top with the boundaries. And we have to understand how to do this. In terms of this last thing with the triggers and whatever, this means healing, right? This means healing. We're going to talk a little bit about that next week, God willing. We talk about Sefirat. This is going to be the concept of confidence versus egoism. When we get more to the aspect of what Sefirat is all about, which is self-worth. But again, all of these things you can take. We have to have the proper balance, right? One of the reasons the word is, we call them the Sefirat in Kabbalah, but way back when, the more ancient books called them midot. Midot, we said, means characteristics. We also said that internally our characteristics are born by emotional intelligence. And so really it's the aspect of emotional intelligence, but also what that means is midah is also measurements, because all of these things, they're good, but they can also be taken astray. They can also be taken to an unhealthy extreme, right? Self-worth is good. Don't turn that into egoism, right? So we have to see how we're supposed to look at ourselves versus, but not right. We have to come from a healthy place and not coming from an external place, which leads us to not seeing who we really are. We're getting confidence and humility versus egoism and arrogance, right? We have to be able to properly fine tune that. Anyway, that's going to be next week. But the more we get to a place of health in all aspects of ourselves, it affects every other aspect of ourselves. And we come to a place of balance, and we're able to use and call upon our midot in the proper way. We're able to recognize where it's just like, hold on a second, I feel that feeling, whatever that is, when someone is kind of trampling on me because that's the kind of person they are, right? Or just because there's an aspect of me that's allowing that to happen. So like, I can say, wait, hold on a second, right? And I become more, I build myself a little bit more in terms of like, oh wait, I'm able to sense that timing where I'm feeling smaller, I'm feeling like I have a problem with this, but then I don't want to say anything because I don't want to appear. So like you start to recognize, the more you work with this, the more you become conscious of this, the more you talk to people about this, talk to a therapist, talk to a mentor, talk to a coach, whatever it might be, talk to Rabbi, Rebbitzin, whatever it is, the more you work on this, you start to like catch yourself in those moments. You say, hold on a second, I'm feeling blah, 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 right? And you go ahead and start to establish those kind of boundaries in those moments. And then if people kind of trample on it again, you say, wait, I'm working on this, right? And you can even make it like as if you're like doing the self-help activity for yourself, you know? And you catch yourself and you say something, right? And slowly but surely, you start to get stronger with it, and there'll be times that you mess up, maybe, or times you forget, and then afterwards, like, oh, I feel like such a whatever. But then, like, okay, it's part of a growth process. I am where I am. No need to think like, oh, why can't I be more confident like that person, or why was I put in this particular place and born in this crappy situation that now I'm like this? Yo. Well, that's God's question. That's God's questions. He put you exactly where you need to be. This is the healing. This is the path. This is the growth that you need to go through. The other people, they have other challenges, or maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have any challenges. Okay, that's what God gave them. That was what's good for them. You're in your space. Don't get out of your space. You're in the here and now, and you say, okay, what does Hashem want from me this moment? What do I want from me this moment? And I build from the space that is, right? Not get into everyone else, not get into the past, not get anxious about the future, not to be looking over my shoulder what this person has or doesn't have. I am where I am. And then, okay, how am I going to go ahead and build from here? How am I going to grow from here? How am I going to take the next step from here, right? And there are going to be ups, and there are going to be, times where missed opportunities to go ahead and move up, and that's okay. That's part of the journey, and we don't just change all like that, but we can have a certain mind shift like that, and then we can move forward from there, and hopefully on an ongoing basis get stronger with it. My friends, questions, thoughts, ideas on this aspect of Gevura, on personal boundaries, on self-respect and respect for others in relationships? Go ahead. All right. You're welcome, my friends. Hope this is meaningful. Thank you so much for joining me. God willing, we will see you next week.